One in five suffer.
Erase the stigma.
Brain difference is not a crime.
Mental health isn't just your problem.
It's our problem.
And now, Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
Welcome to Mental Health Mondays.
As always, I am Marla.
And I am Dave, and we are so glad to be here with you today. We have an amazing show for you today, but before we get started, I want to remind you to text the word GIVE, that's GIVE, to 818-698-1021 and support our A Dollar Today Keeps the Stigma Away campaign.
And I also just want to quickly say that we are so dedicated and excited to always be able to have these conversations, that Dave is in New York, I'm in Vegas, and there's nothing will stop this show. So we are here.
Absolutely.
Yes, and we're excited.
Okay, we have an amazing show for you today. Our guest today is an Los Angeles-based chef, award-winning cookbook author, a culinary ambassador to the National Pediatric Cancer Foundation, and co-chair of Los Angeles Mayor Garcetti's AAPI LA initiative. Her fifth book, Katie Chen's Global Family Cookbook, was published in June of last year, 2022. Recently in January, she was on the Clarkson show. Plus, Katie's has her own one-woman show that's called Holy Shitake. A Wok Star, is born, and that's in development with the theater there in St. Paul, Minnesota. And like most of us, she has a story to tell, a story that to some might seem like it's a story of tragedy, resilience, but subsequently has turned it into a story of triumph. When we come back, we're honored to speak with Katie Chen. Don't go anywhere.
When Dave and Marla get together, it's hot.
Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave and NAMI San Fernando Valley believe it doesn't take much to make life a little better for our neighbors, coworkers, friends, our family members, even our children who suffer with mental illness. When you support our A Dollar Today Keeps the Stigma Away campaign, you are doing your part to erase the stigma surrounding mental illness. For just $1 today, or $1 a day for 1 week, just $7, we can look forward to a future that does not include the unfortunate and uncomfortable stares, bullying, and the subsequent isolation that our loved ones who suffer with brain differences deal with. Text the word GIVE, that's GIVE, to 818-698-1021 to donate. A Dollar Today Keeps the Stigma Away. Brought to you by Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave and NAMI San Fernando Valley.
Okay, we have to start off by saying thank you so much, and we want to welcome our guest, Katie Chen, to Mental Health Mondays. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me, Dave and Marla.
You know, Katie,
man,
you're so comfortable there, and I'm excited about that. You know, you can feel free to jump from chair to chair.
Thanks. It's like musical chairs. Do I get a prize?
I love it. So Katie, since we only have 30 minutes, we're gonna have to jump right in. And first of all, thank you so much for being willing to speak to us today. And like we said in the intro, to many people who are familiar with your story, and we're gonna help those who aren't get familiar with your story. From the very beginning, it kind of felt like a very tragic story. That through all that you've been through and all that your family's been through has seemed to turn into a story of triumph. Take us back to the very beginning, growing up in your family, and explain to us what that was like.
Sure. Well, I think it's a story a lot of immigrant children can relate to. My parents, they immigrated from China in 1956 to Minneapolis, Minnesota, where I was born and raised. My mother was making 50 cents an hour as a seamstress, but she always loved to cook. There were very few Asians at the time, so we really felt like aliens from outer space, right?
Wow.
We were the only, Chinese people in our whole high school.
Yeah.
Anyway, my mother always loved to cook, and then one day she threw a luncheon for some sewing clients, and they were blown away by her authentic Chinese cuisine. They encouraged her to start teaching classes and to cater, and one thing led to another, and she started catering. She was very successful at it, and she caught the eye of a local socialite who wanted to invest in my mother's first restaurant. I'm going to tell this part of the story quickly and get to some other stuff. But anyway, the socialite happened to be friends with Sean Connery. What? And Sean Connery came to visit his friend Robert Redford, who was directing the film Ordinary People. And my mother catered the welcome party. I was there. I was serving, Sean Connery dumplings. It was crazy. I was a little girl. And he turned around and he said, "Oh, nice dumplings." Anyway, she went on to build.
That's a pretty good accent that you got there.
We get few impressions on our show.
Exactly. I love it.
I've been practicing for you guys. Just kidding. So once people found out Sean Connery had invested in her restaurant, well, the chain was a huge success. She ended up opening over 40 restaurants and eventually sold her company to General Mills. She never even went to high school, my mother, and she became this incredible, successful entrepreneur against all odds. And I ended up following in her footsteps. It's a whole story I won't go into right now, but I'd like to talk about her inspirational journey because against all odds, she became this huge success, but not just because she was, a minority, not just because she was marginalized. She didn't speak English well, she had an accent, but she had so many incredible hardships, such as my sister committing suicide when she was 19 years old. And I was 8 years old when it happened. But, in Chinese American culture, you're taught to just swallow it, keep it down.
I was gonna ask you, Katie, how we all have different things that we can honestly say, unfortunately, are customary to our different cultures and communities. And so I really haven't heard that much about the Chinese culture, but it is something that I really wanted to touch on because number one, the fact that your gift was handed down, and number two, how you dealt in your family as a Chinese American with mental health, because obviously, if there's suicide, that's what we're talking about.
That's right. I mean, we were taught to not make waves, to not dwell on the past. I think for a lot of Chinese immigrant parents, it's a waste of time. Don't burden future generations with it. It just gets in the way of being productive. So when this happened, and my sister was, battling severe depression, and that, especially back in the day, wasn't something that we talked about. And it wasn't like my parents even knew tools existed to help her. So, I mean, this is really quite sad. And it's a story that I chronicled in USA Today last May for Mental Health Awareness Month and AAPI Month. So when it happened, the way my father coped with it is he just took her picture off the wall and stuck it in a drawer. And then we never spoke of her again. So at a very young age, we were taught to bury secrets, live with shame, don't bring dishonor to your family, don't draw attention to your family, and just move on.
So clearly with your gift and as you've clearly, we all can see where you are now. And I think one of the things that I love is I always say that everyone has a story. To me, I'm in love with stories because most people just look at the end result of where you are. So we see all your amazing accomplishments. You've written your 5th book. And so how did you, Katie, squeeze out of that what you were literally indoctrinated to do and how to handle this to be where you are now? How'd that happen for you?
No one's ever asked me that question. It's such an interesting question. I think, what happened to me is I lived with a lot of my own secrets and shame. And I'm on my 3rd marriage, 3 times a charm. And I'm not going to mention any names, but I was not in the best relationship married to my second husband, and it
Okay.
sort of mirrored what my mother went through because my father was an alcoholic and he was also battling depression and anxiety. So, you know, you live what you learn as a child.
So now, as you talk about that marriage, Katie, I was confused because did I get this correct that you didn't meet your husband until your wedding day?
No, that was my mother. Was in
that
an
was your
arranged
mom.
marriage
Okay.
in China. Yeah,
Okay.
she was
Okay.
match made to somebody. No.
I
That's
was-
not.
Okay, so that was your mom's relationship.
Correct.
Was that to your father?
Yes.
Okay.
And they both passed now, just FYI. But
Okay.
I think I had sort of an awakening when I decided to leave my husband and quit my job as a senior VP at Fox all in the same month. I guess I just had a midlife crisis, and I'm just my life is an open book now, so I'm just gonna tell you what happened.
Yeah.
I was actually taking Zoloft because I've had my own, issues in the past, but also I was married to like a jerk. So I think I was taking that to sort of mask everything that was going on. And I actually ran out of my prescription and I had to
Wow.
go to London for work. And I, was experiencing withdrawal. And then I was like, oh my God, he really is an asshole. And I was like, oh my God. And I like felt all these things again, like actually felt things. And I think that was sort of like a turning point. But then I just decided to change my life completely because I had the power to do so. And I realized for other people, if I had had kids and I didn't have the financial resources, I probably wouldn't have had the guts to do it. I didn't have children yet. I was making good money. So I felt like I had the independence, and I kind of looked at my mother's life and realized that she stayed in this marriage to my father because she was protecting us and she was afraid to leave. I mean, think about it. It's the 1970s and you've got 5 kids and you're making 50 cents an hour as a seamstress. Like, where are you going to go?
Right.
Absolutely. In a new country, so to speak.
Right. I was going
Not
to
so
say,
to speak, literally. Yeah.
being in a marginalized community is also even harder. So it's kind of like, the mentality of we're all we've got.
Exactly.
So I understand that fully.
And the shame of getting divorced in an Asian
Right.
family, it's very shameful. So like for me to get divorced once was bad enough, but then twice, oh my God. So I remember when my mom picked me up from the airport and I was like too afraid to even tell her. I made my sister do it. So then I'm in the car with her and we start talking about it. And then she, I started to open up with her a little bit. And then I started to cry and she goes, you shouldn't cry so much. It's inefficient.
Wow.
Word, inefficient. Okay,
Wow.
so Katie, don't move. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to hear more and get more in detail to your story, your journey, and all of the things that have come from the success that has come from your pain, meaning that you have redirected. And we'll talk about that when we come back from this break. Don't move. Everybody stay right there. More with Katie when we come back.
It's time for the Mental Health Minute with Marla and Dave.
The WHO estimates that there are currently over 46 million people worldwide living with dementia. That number is expected to rise over 131 million by 2050. The worldwide cost of dementia is estimated at $818 billion US.
The causes of dementia can vary depending on the types of brain changes that may be taking place. Types of dementias include Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal disorders, and vascular dementia. It is common for people to have mixed dementia, a combination of 2 or more types of dementia. For example, some people have both Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia.
Dementia is a general term for a decline in mental ability severe enough to interfere with daily life. Many people use the term Alzheimer's disease and dementia interchangeably. Alzheimer's is a specific disease and dementia is not.
Early signs of dementia are memory loss, difficulty planning or solving problems. It could also include difficulty doing familiar tasks, being confused about time or place, challenges understanding visual information, problems speaking or writing, misplacing things, and it could also include poor judgment or decision making.
So here on Mental Health, we always encourage you, if you or someone you know is showing any of these signs, please, we ask, seek medical help.
This message is brought to you by Mental Health Mondays with Marla and Dave.
David is a thinker. I never do anything without thinking about it first. Marla is a feeler.
I basically wear my personality on my sleeve.
But when Marla and Dave get together, it's like a match dancing with a firecracker.
So Katie,
All right,
we just heard you say before we went to the break that because of the way that your culture and your family dynamics work, you put your sister up to telling your mother. It seems like you were almost telling your mother that you got married or gotten divorced for the second time, correct?
Yes.
Right. So, and I also heard you say there were 5 children. Did you have? Was it all girls? Did you have brothers?
Well, it was actually 6 because my
6?
sister had
okay.
passed.
That's right.
So all girls and 1 boy.
Okay. And so what is that? Is it even possible for you to take us inside that moment? What is that moment like when you found out that your sister had, through her illness, taken her own life?
I just remember my parents were speaking in hushed tones in Chinese to each other, but we didn't understand Chinese, at least most of us.
Really?
Well, my parents were trying to learn English themselves, so they would speak English to us.
Got it.
And then they sent us to Chinese school, but then we played poker under the stairs and played hooky because we were so embarrassed to be Asian because we were the only ones. So I so regret it now. So, already grew up with a lot of cultural shame, not feeling like we belonged. So that being said, I remember they were speaking in hushed tones and in Chinese, and I thought it was weird because we couldn't really understand them anyway. And then my mother came out of the room and she'd been crying. And we rarely saw my mother cry because she was so stoic, because she really didn't have a choice. She had to be so strong. And then she told us that my sister had committed suicide. And I was so young, I didn't really feel like I should ask questions in that moment. Right. That was just my gut telling me just to be quiet. And then I remember that night lying in bed with my sister, Jeannie, who is 4 years older than me. And she was almost like my mini mom because my mom was so busy. She really took care of me. And I just remember it was in the still of the night and we were holding hands. And I asked her what suicide meant. And it just kind of like that word just kind of floated above us. And then she said, it means she took her own life. And I don't think I really completely grasped it at first. And I didn't feel any emotion. I don't think I knew how to feel. I just didn't know how to grieve it. I couldn't process what was this horrible thing. And then, as I said, the next morning after the funeral, we didn't go to the funeral. My father taking her photo down and us never speaking of it again until my mother and I came together in the kitchen. Finally, I was much older after I left my first career, and she and I were able to cook together, and that's when she finally opened up about her life in China, about being in an arranged marriage, and then she finally started to talk a little bit about my sister and what that was like.
Man, so one thing that I really appreciate is many times as we can mention some of the negative things about various cultures, it seems like the bonding around just cooking food together and enjoying food. Talk to us about that and how healing that can be.
Mm-hmm.
It really can be. I think the simple act it can be quite meditative, cooking and baking. My friend Val Van Gelder has a platform called Depressed Cake Shop, and it's the whole philosophy is based on this idea that if you quietly stick to one thing, whether it's making dumplings, following a recipe, it can be very therapeutic and very healing. And I think through this motion of her and I sitting down, whether it was, kneading out dough for dumplings or marinating beef, whatever it was, I think it was almost like a trance my mother fell into, where she felt comfortable to start talking to me. And it was almost like she was talking at me. It wasn't really a conversation. She just finally felt like she could trust herself and trust me.
Just speak it out loud. Yeah.
And just
finally.
And I think she knew deep down that the only way to really help me, not that she felt I don't think she felt like I needed help, but I think she was very wise that somehow in her own way, she knew she needed to stop this, generational trauma.
Right.
That she had to finally speak her truth. And it's interesting because she didn't necessarily have similar conversations with my siblings. And maybe she just, somehow knew deep down that I would be the one to break it, to speak it, to teach it.
And what's interesting about that as well is that, it seems like the bond of cooking and enjoying food is something that your mom just sort of did naturally. And it was an individual thing. It was a way to bond individually. So, and I really love that about how you were describing that. And Marla, you were about to say something.
No, I was just going to say that it's amazing to me that, the one thing I like to always share is that I believe that all real transformation is hidden inside or connected to a transparency. And so this transparent truth, and I feel like that just talking to you, that you and your mother almost shared this bond of transparency and truth in what you both had a love that she could relate to you. This is something that seems like that, you connected with her even on a cooking level, and she passed it down to you, and you guys had this special bond. So there's something about her heart that connected with your heart, and that she kind of knew that, we always want our next generation to be bigger, better, stronger. So she knew that you'd be able to go forward and change minds and lives with your family story.
Right. I would like to think so. And I think it was very hard for her to do it. And I think she knew I had to be mature enough to listen to it. And
so we're thankful for that, for sure. Because I just
absolutely.
Yes.
I was reading your story and I said, the beauty of it, and for me, is looking at how, we have serious mental health in our family, and how different stories and tragedies, so to say, give birth to different triumphs. And yours being cooking, and it transcending all of this is just amazing to me. So it's intriguing. I'm intrigued.
Yes, well, in Asian families, love is often communicated through food, not through saying I love you. Oftentimes it's not expressed verbally or touching or hugging. And my mother, never once said I love you, but I knew she did, of course.
Right.
But it was shown through, like, if you got all A's, you would get a whole fish with black bean sauce, and if you came home with all B's, you get pork with chow mein.
Well, the funny thing about even what you're saying is that it seems like the conveyance of emotion and love is almost semantic. It doesn't have to be done in the same way for everybody in every culture, as long as it's understood and felt. And it seems like, with all that your mom had gone through, the love for you, for her children, and for you specifically, and for your siblings, was still just as strong. So that's an amazing story. And I wanted to ask you, with all that's been going on, the issues with, the politics in our culture, in our country right now, and around the world, and the issues that have been plaguing some of the tragedies in the AAPI community, how has that really how have you dealt with that? And as part of your sharing your story, does that kind of help kind of put a salve, some healing balm on some of those wounds? And I don't answer that yet, because we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, we'll come back to that question. All right, that music, you know what that means. Marla's head is wiggling. Yeah, get it, girl.
You know what, Dave? I'm gonna step my dancing up because I'm in Vegas. What?
I like that.
What?
Okay.
I'm gonna come all the way through with it.
I'm not gonna be mad at the pasty. So obviously that music means it's poll time. Marla, what was our poll question last week?
Last week, the question we asked was, what is the average delay between the onset of mental illness symptoms and treatment? Was it A, 1.5 years, B, 5 years, or C, 11 years? And our guest last week, which was Sarah.
Actually, the week before.
So she, I believe, I can't remember what the answer was.
I'm not sure that she got this one correct, but we'll actually give Katie a chance to take a stab at this. Katie, what do you think the average delay between the onset of a mental illness or mental illness symptoms and finally going to seek treatment? Is it 1.5 years, 5 years, or 11 years?
I say 5 years.
And I'm pretty sure that's what our guest said as well.
Yeah, I think so. But you know what? And it's unfortunate.
Unfortunately.
When the odds are higher, but the actual answer is 11 years. It was C.
Shut.
You know what, Katie? We're a second chance kind of couple. I got you.
All
Here's
right.
the question for next week. What is the number of U.S. adults living with PTSD? 5 million, 12 million, or 18 million?
I'm supposed to guess.
Yeah.
18 million.
Do.
18 million.
Okay, so now here's the trick about this. You've made your guess. We have it on record, but you'll have to tune in next week because we have to ask this next week because it's next week's poll. So for those of you in our
audience, we can reveal the answer.
You know where to find our poll questions. Hop on on social media. We always love to hear from you. Cast your vote. Your voice matters, and we'll join your answers with what Katie responded to next week. So don't forget to tune in and join us. And don't forget, text GIVE to Dave.
818-698-1021. $1 today keeps the stigma away. We'll be right back. And okay,
right.
Just like that, we are back. Now, Katie, I was asking you about, with all the tragedies that have been happening to various communities, this unfortunately lately, even to the AAPI communities, with some of the shootings that the community has experienced. How do you think that your story and the things that you're sharing can be helpful in moments like these?
Well, I think that it's just been a horrible chapter in our history as AAPI. The violence that we've experienced, it's just inexcusable. And how do we, teach our children? How do we make them feel unafraid? How do we set up a generation of AAPI that is not afraid to seek mental health tools? When we look at Half Moon Bay and Monterey Park, and we look at it was so unfortunate. But, we think about those two men, and very similar. Both, had anxiety, both had depression, but you realize that generation, they didn't have the tools to seek help. No tools whatsoever. And then, all these hate crimes and violence, we are taught to just keep it inside. But the only way that we will come together and educate, it all starts with education, is to not be afraid to talk about it, to not be afraid to educate our kids, to teach our children to be full of pride for who we are.
Yeah.
And I think that, the more that we bottle it up inside, the worse it's going to be for all of us, because we can't create change unless we're willing to speak out.
And we really appreciate you for more than doing your part. A very wonderful story. Let's change the subject a little bit and talk about something a little bit more upbeat. Specifically, the one-woman show that you're working on. Tell us about that. It sounds amazing. And when I first read the part about a Wok Star, that was so interesting and intriguing. Tell us about the one-woman show.
Well, my mother's story is so inspirational. And I think that by sharing that story, it will create a lot of hope for a lot of people. And when she was still alive and she became ill, I started writing about her relationship. And then when she passed away, I put all of the material in a canvas bag, and I was too afraid to open it up again because I knew I would just be a wreck and burst into tears. And then during COVID, I felt like, if not now, then when?
When, right.
Right. And it's never too late. And so I took a master class on how to write a solo show. And it really traces my journey from being a little girl in Minneapolis, Minnesota, being so ashamed for being Chinese, and how I finally overcame that by coming together with my mother in these moments in the kitchen together. And that through realizing that my journey in life is all about honoring her culinary legacy, that my passion became my purpose. And that at that moment in time, I finally fell in love with being Chinese.
Man, I love that.
That as you talked about, in your culture healing, I'm just going to tell you that I must be Asian somewhere deep down inside, because David, that he will tell you, that is my favorite cuisine. If I had to have one culture of food that I ate on a regular basis, he teases me all the time, like, something new. I know you want to go have Asian food. I'm like,
well, we all knew, we all have food and cooking in common, right?
Yes.
And it's such a wonderful gateway to teach kids, especially about other cultures.
Absolutely. And it's a wonderful gateway to almost teach kids about anything, because like you said, and even in your family's experience, it just kind of disarms, because everybody has to eat. Everybody has to eat, and someone has to cook the food. So if you put those things together, and then the sharing back and forth, it's just a marriage made in heaven as far as I'm concerned. Thank you so much.
Eddie, thank you.
Before we... go ahead, Marla.
I was just saying, thank you for joining us. Your story is amazing, and 30 minutes is never long enough, but we appreciate you coming and sharing at least the highlights with us. We're glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we go, Katie, if you can give us just one parting message.
Leap and the net will appear.
I love that. I love that. You don't have to wait for the safety net before you go ahead and take that leap of faith.
Well, we'll be looking out. Where can we find you, Katie? Where can everybody find you online?
At Chef Katie Chin, and my blog is chefkatiechin.com.
Well, there you have it.
That.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys.
We'll see for Mental Health Mondays for our audience and our family. Thank you. We'll see you guys next week.
Bye-bye.
It's raw, real, and unfiltered.